All right, so Corey from SaaS Pegasus here, and today I'm going to start a new series of videos where I build a product with SaaS Pegasus from the ground up. So in this video, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the product that I want to build, and then I will probably just set up my Pegasus project, and that'll be it for the first one. So let's dive in. So what product am I going to build? And to answer that, I'm going to first kind of talk about a problem I have with Pegasus itself. So this is Pegasus, sort of like a default empty project. And one feature that Pegasus has is internationalization, which means that you can translate your app into as many languages as you want. So for example, if I choose French here, my UI will mostly turn into French, although you'll notice that blog is still here. I don't know what they call that, le blog. And then like if I go to sign up, you'll see like, some of the stuff is translated, some of it isn't. This is not really an issue with Pegasus. This is an issue with translations. And basically, like when I add a new feature, I don't always go and do the work of finding all the French translations to update the French version of the site. But it would be cool if every version of Pegasus shipped with like French and Spanish and German and Mandarin and all these languages out of the box. And what I was thinking about is that AI is pretty good at translating stuff these days. And so what I'm imagining basically is like, I'm sure you could just write a script that would pick up your translation file, pass everything into GPT or some equivalent thing like that, get back your translations in, a whole bunch of different languages. It would probably take a while to run. And I could write that as a script and make it available for Pegasus, but that's probably a problem that a lot of other people have. And so what I'm imagining is that that's actually a SaaS application where, instead of a script, you upload your translations. And I don't know too many details. I know Django uses a specific file format for translations. I don't know if there's others that we'd have to support. But basically you upload your translations, we do the GPT translate magic, and then you download them in whatever languages you want. And I don't know, that feels like a pretty useful product. And to be fair, like I think these apps exist already, and I did a little bit of market research, which I suppose I could talk about. So this is kind of like my the document that I used to just kind of think about this idea. But so TransFX is the one that I am most familiar with. This is the one that Django itself, I think, uses. But like when you go to TransFX, it's like their pricing is pretty high for what it does. They start at $120 a month, which seems kind of unnecessarily high to me. And then, there's all these other ones, and some indie hacker entrepreneur types would say like, okay, there's like all these other companies doing this thing. Market's too crowded. I can't compete. I'm going to give up. And that's probably true. But it's also a good sign that there's lots of companies in the market. That means that's a real market. It means that businesses are willing to pay, like $120 plus a month. I mean, those are the starting plans. So that's a good sign. I think that possibly I could carve out some kind of niche in this space. If not, I've got a YouTube series building a product with Pegasus. I am thinking of maybe offering this code base as sort of like, once I've gotten it to sort of an MVP-like state, to as an add-on to Pegasus for people to see how it was built and all that jazz. So yeah, I mean, even if this app doesn't end up, taking off or making any money or anything, I still think it'll be fun to build. It's a good opportunity to showcase Pegasus. I sort of thought of a bunch of different use cases for this project, and this is the one that I think is kind of the simplest and the best match for what I wanted to do. Okay, so that's the plan. For my MVP, so I talked about this script, and basically I want to be able to have people upload translations and store them in a data model. I want to run my AI script, and then ideally people could like look at the translations and edit them. I'm sure GPT is not going to generate perfect results. Oftentimes there's also sort of like UI issues where you sort of like need text to fit in a certain space. So I'm not going to worry too much about that, but I'm just going to say, okay, we're giving you a starting point. You can go modify those values as you need. And some of the stuff I hope to showcase in this series, I'll do billing. I don't exactly know how the billing will work. That'll be a subject of probably multiple screencasts down the line, but it'll definitely have a billing component. Teams and roles, Celery integration, all these translation scripts will have to run in the background, so that's a good opportunity to use Celery. Bit of OpenAI probably. I looked at the other translation APIs, and it seems like ChatGPT is actually better than most of these dedicated translation APIs, which is kind of wild. But so I'll probably just use ChatGPT to start. Obviously, this will demo the translation features of Pegasus and deployment. So yeah, that's the plan. Let me know what you think. And with that, I am going to now set up my Pegasus project for this. So this is my projects page, and I'm going to create a new project. So I actually, like, before I started the screencast, I sat, as I do, on my domain registrar searching for ideas for names for this thing. If you have any good names, please let me know. Leave them in the comments. The one that I was thinking of to start is Translite. So it's kind of like a play on words with translate, and it's like a light version. There were some domains available, not the .com, but anyway, I'm not going to be too bothered about the name for now, but I'm gonna call it Translite for now. I don't buy domains until I have an MVP, so this name could easily change, but we're gonna go with Translite. Now I'm gonna set the project ID, which will also be Translite, and this is what Pegasus. So I'm gonna go through this a little bit slowly, and part of the goal here is to have a record of what all of these features do in Pegasus. So if you're not interested in that, feel free to just kind of blaze through this or skip ahead. I'm going to go through these features one at a time, and I'm going to talk in detail about what each of them does. So the project ID is used for the source folder for my app, and it also gets used in several other places. So this is an important one. It's a little bit annoying to change later, but that's okay. The description basically just shows up like in the landing page and in your sort of like SEO meta tags. So I'm not going to worry too much about this. It's really easy to change later, but I'll just say maybe like translate your SaaS applications in minutes with AI. Domain name, I'm going to leave that as localhost for now, since I have not bought a domain yet. Corey, let's use my SaaS Pegasus email address. Include examples. For now, I am going to include the examples. What this will do is it will enable, let me change this back to English for a sec. And I'm going to sign in here. It will enable this examples gallery. The reason I'm going to enable it for now is because I want these background tasks. I know that I'm going to use this sort of background task functionality. Oh, this isn't, I don't have Celery running, which is why this isn't moving. So that's why I'm going to enable the examples. I'm probably going to grab that Celery example and then uncheck this box in a future update, but I'm going to start with it enabled. Database, I'm going to use Postgres. I'm actually not going to use Docker. I recommend most people use Docker because it's the easiest way to get up and running without sort of having to mess with, setting up a database and installing a virtual environment and, various Windows dependencies and so on. I like to do my development natively. So I'm going to run probably my services with Docker, Postgres and Redis, but I'm not going to run my app with Docker. And I have my own sort of Docker script that I use for all my projects. So I'm just going to use that. CSS framework is an important option. This is obviously going to be which CSS framework your project is going to use. I'm going to use Tailwind. I've been using Tailwind on all my projects, and I have I was a little sort of bothered, as many people are, by like all the class names in your HTML and stuff. I've sort of gotten over that, and I find myself using Tailwind for all my projects these days. And the the open source options for libraries, for component libraries and stuff like that, it's sort of miles ahead of everything else. So that's honestly probably the biggest reason that I use it. But I've come to like Tailwind, even though I used to be sort of old manish about it. Front-end framework. So this is kind of like whether you want to use React or HTMX for some of the interactive bits of Pegasus. I'm going to use HTMX. In general, ever since kind of learning and using HTMX more, I find I rarely need something as fancy as React. And certainly for this project where it's not going to be, I'm not building Trello or something where there's going to be like sort of a very interactive client-side UI. So I think HTMX will be a good fit for this project. Django debug toolbar is pretty self-explanatory. It's going to enable the debug toolbar for your project. I don't use this all that much, but maybe I'll try it for this one. It can be useful for sort of showing you, database when you're making too many database queries and stuff like that. So, and it doesn't really hurt to have it. So I'm going to enable it. I am going to enable auto format code. I highly recommend that everybody pretty much uses this. So this will format all my code in a consistent way with black and isort, and it will also give me commit hooks for Git, so that whenever I commit code, it will also match those formats. And it means you don't ever have to think about formatting, which is nice. Like, it's just one of those things, just like the project is consistent, you don't have to worry about it. It's kind of all handled by tooling. And so it's nice. It also makes like code merges easier because like all code has to be kind of written in the same style, which is nice. I'm not going to include static files. So I recommend new projects keep this on. This will avoid having to set up a front-end build pipeline just to get sort of your app running and looking reasonable. I'm very used to setting up front-end build pipelines with Pegasus, obviously. So this is not a problem for me. I'm going to uncheck it. Okay, so now we're coming to sort of more of the advanced features. I'm definitely going to use teams because I'm imagining that companies or projects are going to have potentially multiple people managing translations, potentially inviting like translators to come and look over their translations. So Teams is definitely a must. I'm not going to use the Teams example just because I kind of know what I'm doing with Teams. I don't need that. I'm definitely going to use internationalization, which will enable multi-language support. So this app will be kind of the first use case of itself, if that makes sense. So ideally, this app will be available in a bunch of languages, and I can sort of test everything on the app. Wagtail, I'm not going to enable for now. Wagtail gives you like a blog out of the box, and it is pretty nice, and it's a nice way to sort of have a user editable content site. It's also quite heavy. It comes with a lot of dependencies and stuff, and I'm just not sure I need it, so I'm just going to leave it out for now. Maybe I'll enable it in a future option or in a future version. I am going to use the OpenAI demos because I want. I'm going to use ChatGPT for this stuff, so I might as well have all that stuff installed. Async is an interesting one. Do I need anything asynchronous? So this will kind of enable asynchronous support and WebSockets out of the box, which allows you to do like streaming type of stuff. Like one of the common use cases is like if you're using ChatGPT and you want kind of streaming responses, that type of thing uses async and WebSockets. Maybe I'll enable it. I feel like this is async, honestly, is a tech that I haven't used a ton on any of my own projects. So yeah, I think I might need it. I might turn it off at some point. But yeah, might as well have it for now. Coming to authentication, I'm not going to bother with any of this login with stuff for now. Those are easy to add later, and it's not just clicking a button. Like you have to kind of like go into Google and make an app and these other things. So I'm not going to worry about that for now. Maybe down the line I might add those and set it up. API keys, yeah, why not? I imagine some future state you could imagine this translation service having an API to sort of do translations for you. Yeah, API keys seem useful. Use impersonation. So this feature allows you to like simulate any other user's accounts. without having their password, which is really nice. I always enable this for my apps because it's really helpful for debugging and stuff. Okay, so billing. We're not going to do any sort of e-commerce-y thing, so I'm not going to enable that. I am going to enable subscriptions. And my subscription billing model. So standard pricing is just kind of like your typical small, medium, large plans. That's the most common SaaS pricing. Per unit or per seat is like, yeah, basically if you're charging for the number of seats or like some other quantity. I think, so how I imagine the pricing for this working is probably there's going to be multiple tiers. Like if you look at like all of these, if you look at all of these other apps, let's just like go to this one. Like they basically, they price based on sort of like number of translations, I think is like the main, yeah. So like words included. I think this is the main feature that people probably upgrade for. So I want to probably do something like this. Yo, that is expensive. So I think that's still going to be kind of a standard thing. And then one of the fun things I'm looking forward to on this project is sort of documenting and figuring out the best way to do this sort of like, okay, you get 100,000 words or whatever it is going to be. But I'm going to start with a standard plan and try to bake that in somehow. Subscription pricing UI, do I want to use, I'm going to start with the embedded pricing table just because it's simpler. And we'll see if I can get away with it or if I have to switch to something else eventually. Okay, so documentation, deployment, integration. So I know that I want to use Kamal to deploy this. I'm going to try to deploy it onto sort of like a standard VPS, Linode, Hetzner type of thing. S3. So S3 will host my files on my media files on S3 instead of sort of in a local directory. With Kamal, I generally would want to use this because Kamal doesn't actually ship with support for using the file system. So I am going to turn on S3. CI, I'll use GitHub Actions. I will use Sentry. Email marketing, none for now. I'll probably add that later. And Pegasus version, latest available, my license. Okay, that is everything. So that was a bit of a slog, but hopefully that was maybe useful talking through those features and talking through my process of enabling and disabling and choosing those features. So now comes the fun part, where we are going to push our project to GitHub. So I'm going to add a repo for this. Sisu translates. That sounds good. And I'm going to create the code base. And fingers crossed, this works. All right, green bar. So let's check out the repo. Alrighty, and we have our project here. We committed one commit just now, Pegasus version 2024.2.4, yada, yada, yada. Very good. Okay, so that is creating your code base. Next up, let's get our local development environment up and running. So I am going to grab this clone URL and I'm going to go to my CLI. We can shut down that demo server. I can make this a little bit bigger. And let's see, git clone that. Okay. Let's deactivate. And now let's open it in the IDE. We can, let's see, presentation mode. How's that? Yeah, there we go. And now we will open translate. Okay, and I'm hoping PyCharm will tell me, yep, I want to create a virtual env. I want to use Python 3.11. It's found my requirements file. Let's go ahead and do that. I really have used this npm install feature in PyCharm, but what happens if I press this button? Seems like that's working. So let's see, this is going to turn away and install my stuff. So I mentioned that I use a local Docker Postgres database. And so my setup basically is I have, this is actually on GitHub. So I'll just show this really quick. So this is my local Docker setup that I use, which is basically Postgres, Redis, and then another Postgres with pgvector installed for like sort of language model-y AI stuff. And then these lines expose these ports to my local host. And so basically, I can use this Docker Postgres just like a local Postgres. And so I just have a single Postgres instance running all of my projects. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create my Postgres DB for this. So create DB. Let's see if I can get the syntax right on my first shot. Maybe lowercase h. 52. U Postgres, and then translate. Yes. So that should have created my database. We can close that tab. And let's see, close that, close that. Let's see, so now the one thing we need to do is set up our .env. So I'm going to open, like this thing here, .env.example. Right, so I'm just going to copy that file to a .env, and then let's see if migrations run. Let's see, Postgres, localhost, translate. Yeah, that should be, oops. Work on translates. Oh, no module named Daphne. Is that a bug in Pegasus? Or is it still installing? Oh, dev requirements. Yeah, so PyCharm did not find my dev requirements. It only found my regular requirements. There we go. Let that run. So let's see. Run server. What I am expecting to happen is we will see a ugly unstyled server because we did not enable static files. Yes. That is a big menu bar. So let's do, and in theory, PyCharm already ran npm install. Let's see. Yeah. So now we do npm run devwatch. And so devwatch will listen for changes to my JavaScript and CSS source files and compile them into my Django static directory. And if I do a hard refresh here, then we have our app up and running. Okay. Things are going surprisingly smoothly. How exciting. So let's create an account. SaaS Pegasus. Won't worry about team name. Okay, this is amazing. And so the next thing I will always do is make myself a super user, which we can do with manage.py promote user to super user. That's not the right email address. Okay, very good. So now I should be able to go to /admin. Boom. Okay, so we are up and running. How long did that take? I don't know, maybe like, I don't know what time I started, but 10 minutes, something like that. So this is probably a good place to wrap up for now. We have our project up and running, and next session we will jump in and start doing some coding. So looking forward to seeing you then. For now, this is Corey from SaaS Pegasus, starting a new app. See you later.